Hello there, and welcome to the Investigative Report. It's June 28th, 2022. We're coming to you from my studio in Kinsley Library in beautiful Kinsley, Kansas. I'm Brady Kraft. This is my co-anchor, Kathleen Ball. Today we have an interesting story coming from pages of Kinsley history. It involves a good boy going wrong.
Our story today takes place in the early days of western Kansas. We have to go way back before the turn of the 20th century, when Kansas was still a pretty undeveloped state. This is when Stanley M. Earp was born on November 1st, 1890 in Ulysses, Kansas. He was born the son of George Washington Earp and Anna Earp. He had a sister, Mabel, born a year before him, and a brother, Walter E., was born after him. Sadly, Walter died within 24 hours. Stanley went into the United States Army during the time of the Mexican Border War in 1916, but the Army discharged him because of a slight injury in the arm. Before marriage, Stanley worked as a representative for the Firestone Tire and Rubber Company, traveling around selling tires. Stanley met Marian Helen Judd in Dodge City. She was a 1914 graduate of the Dodge City High School. She also attended Washburn College and University of Kansas. The couple was married July 19th, 1918 in her parents' house in Dodge City. It was quite an elaborate wedding. The color scheme was pink and white. The house was decorated with pink and white flowers. The bride wore a gown with white satin and carried a bride's bouquet. When the wedding processional was played, 4 small boys, one being the bride's brother, acted as ribbon bearers. 2 popular songs, I Love You Truly and Because, were sung. The couple then moved to Kinsley and lived in 822 Colony, where they had a baby girl, Betty J. Earp, in 1921. Everything was going well for the young family. Back to you, Brady.
Well, it sure sounds like the couple was off to a good start in the small bird-growing town of Kinsley, Kansas. Had a population of about 1,500, a little bigger than it is now. Let's go to Crystal Blue Waters, who is on the location today at the old Ford Garage on Main Street, Kinsley. What can you add to the story, Crystal?
We pick up our story, Brady, in May of 1919. This is when Harold Kerr and Stanley Earp bought the storage and vulcanizing business of the Kinsley Garage. Mr. Kerr and Mr. Earp planned on taking charge on the 1st of June. Mr. Kerr was a well-known man in Kinsley. Mr. Earp had been to Kinsley frequently as a selling agent for Firestone Auto Tires. The 2 men put in full equipment to do tire work and gave a lot of attention to that line. By February of 1920, Mr. Earp was one of Kinsley's most enterprising young businessmen. Even though he had been in Kinsley for less than a year, he had shown his business ability and made lots of friends who were happy to see him take a step up in the business world. He had staunch supporters in this new venture. In April, Stanley Earp purchased the property opposite to the graphic office, which is now Arrowhead West. They took down the existing frame building and assembled a substantial brick building on the site for his Ford Auto and truck business. This new building greatly improved that part of town. Kinsley appreciated him putting up a good building as it added considerable value not only to his property, but also to every piece of property in downtown Kinsley. In July 1921, Stanley Earp drove to Dodge City on a Monday morning and brought home Mrs. Earp and their new baby, Betty. Mrs. Earp had been staying with her parents. The little family settled down to a good life as respected members of the community. Stanley Earp was described as a man with a heart as big as his body. He had become president of the Kinsley Chamber of Commerce. For one chamber event, an indoor circus and carnival, he turned his new building over to the chamber in its entirety, despite the fact that it meant no little inconvenience and delay to him to have the event. It provided a good social atmosphere between the people of the city and the neighboring territory. No one worked harder than Stanley to make this carnival a success undertaking. The band gave a concert as a prelude, after which the various amusements were put on. The party went on from about 7:30 until 12 o'clock that night. Finally, in June of 1922, Stanley Earp began to move into the new Ford building. This was a very big task. Moving so many vehicles had to have been hard work. The new home for this business was one of the finest garages in western Kansas and decidedly a credit to the town and community. It doesn't look much like it today, but the new home was the last word in convenience and commodity, splendidly lightened and arranged with an idea of comfort and elegance seldom seen in towns many times larger than little old Kinsley. Stan Earp served the citizens with 100% efficiency. It was a big venture, but those who knew Stan Earp best realized he had the visions of the possibilities for future achievements. Everyone thought that it would not be many years before he would be wishing that he had more room than he had provided at that time, but that he built it. The local Mercury newspaper congratulated Stanley on his progressive, up-to-date ideas and wished him abundant success in his new business. Everything was going well for the young business. Back to you, Brady.
Well, Crystal, Stanley Earp certainly was highly thought of in Kinsley. You can imagine what a shock it was to win the whole town when he was arrested on October 10th, 1923, on charges of being implicated in an automobile theft ring. A total of 32 cars were found in Kinsley, Kansas, and it is now reported that they were stolen and sold to the Ford dealership. His bond was set at $10,000 for violating an Automobile Transportation Act. John Nesbitt of London, Kansas, was also arrested for driving a stolen Ford car from Denver to London. Earp confessed that he received $3,000 of the sales from the stolen cars. It wasn't long before the federal agents found 28 stolen cars, mostly sold by the members of the ring to the dealers along the Santa Fe Trail. 23 of these were found in Kinsley, Kansas, and five were found in London, Kansas. The man whom Stan Earp blamed for his downfall was Cleveland Stevenson Tippit, alias Frank S. Brownlee, who occupied a cell adjoining that of Earp's in the Denver County Jail, following his arrest in the act of making the way with the Ford coupe on the Denver streets. Brownlee confessed that he had taken 90 stolen cars to the Earp in the last 2 years. Now, Crystal, Earp had a clever way of hiding his crime. His new Ford building had a full basement. In the back was the entrance with the ramp leading down to it. The stolen cars were driven up into it until they could be sold. We had an interesting visit to what remains of the ramp in the old building. There was no longer an entrance. Well, to continue Tippett's story to the court, he said that he would steal another car in Kansas and then drive it to New Orleans, where he said he had another fence to get rid of it. Then he appropriated a third car in New Orleans and drove it back to Denver, where he would dispose of the car. He then started in his rounds once more. 32 cars were found in Kinsley and 7 in London, making 39 hot cars recovered. They went into investigation 15 more cars under the suspicion in Kinsley, London, and elsewhere. Stan Earp also pleaded guilty and was sentenced to Leavenworth Prison in Kansas. After Stan Earp's arrest, W.M. Walters of Dodge City and F.W. Walters of Alva, Oklahoma, took over the Earp Motor Company and remained a Ford dealership with various owners until 1999. Let's go over to Lorene Bonchella to hear the rest of the story.
For such a young, promising businessman, it was certainly really sad to have him end up in federal prison, Brady. But his story did not end there. Stanley M. Earp was released from Leavenworth Prison after serving 4.5 years during the summer of 1928. He and his wife moved to the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, sometime between 1928 and 1935. They lived in 455 West Maplehurst in Ferndale, Michigan. Stanley worked in banking and mortgage firms. When he finally got settled, he worked for the Federal National Mortgage Association. He eventually became a director of the American Savings and Loan and retired as the president and board chairman of the Citizens Mortgage Corporation. Stan Earp was living in Birmingham when he died at the age of 76 on March 3rd, 1967. He is buried there right beside his wife. You know, Brady, after being in prison, Stanley must have decided to turn his life around, and he became a reformed citizen. At this time, when he was arrested, it was said that he felt sorry for his wife and daughter for what he did. However, his wife did stay with him, and she must have been thankful for them being able to have another life in Michigan. Brady, don't you think that Stanley Earp's life just goes to prove that anyone can make a mistake and continue to have a productive life?
It sure does, Lorraine. Always good to have a happy ending to a story. I'm so glad Stanley was able to turn things around. This has been the Investigators Report, coming to you from Kinsley, Kansas, on behalf of me, Kathleen, Crystal, and Lorraine. We hope you all have only happy endings ahead of you. Have a great day.
Bye.